Now tell me. Hello, Tony.
Yeah.
Can we start now? I think it's 8:35.
Okay. So yeah, so let's start. So let's start. So and this is for like 1 hour, right? Okay. So I thank you all for making the time to join, and as it is our what we plan to do, try to do this like every 3 weeks or every month to get our teachers and other teachers equipped and ready to teach the children concerning the ICT. I hope you all can hear me.
Yes, please.
Okay. Concerning the ICT and with regards to EBI. So, of course, we are going to start with the fundamentals and the functionality of the of computers. So there's something that yes, there's one thing that we have to realize and see that when we talk about the functionalities of a computer, right? I know that you guys know more about it. That when we look at the broad sense of what a computer is, right? You see the functionality of this. Number one, what the computer will do is computer will take a data input. Computer will store a data input instruction in its memory and use them as required. A computer processes the data and converts it into useful information. Computer generates and the output and also the computer controls everything that I've said. So when you see the agenda, when you see the functionalities of a computer, its functionality is just, I'm going to share my screen that will take it from there. When you see the functionalities of a computer, it is just simple. So when you look at this broad set of this, you will see that a computer has input, a process, and an output, right? So when we say that the computer has input, the computer has to input something, right? There has to be something, a keyboard has to get a data. You have to input a data into the computer. The computer will process the data and there will be an output for your monitor or something for you to see, right? Let me give an example. You go to your computer and you send a job or an input information that I want it to print what is on my screen, right? So the computer will get the process will get the job, will get the input, and will go back into it and process the input, and it will come back out. It will come out as what? Through your printer, as this is the job that I wanted to do. So there are so many advantages of what a computer is. So we have it's a high speed computer, is very fast. It's a very fast device. It has the capable of performing many calculations. Is huge in on huge numbers. It has the accuracy and very fast. The calculations are sometimes, let's say, you know what, are sometimes more faster and more accurate. And computers perform most of the jobs good, 100% rate. So when we come to the storage capacity, computer can store information, right? The memory in there is very important. It's a very important part of the computer. We have the computer has much more storage capacity than our head. I don't think that we can store 10 or 100 gig of data in our head, right? Sometimes when we even have some data or some things in our head, we can easily sleep and forget it, right? But computer has the ability to do that, and the computers are reliable. Computers are very, very, very reliable. So we'll go into. Let me start into going through the functionalities of most of the part of the computer, then we'll come to talk more about it. So this part talks about what the use of it, right? And we have so many uses of the computer. When it comes to business, you have using as a form of accuracy, reliability for their payroll, for budget, for sales. When you are in the banking sector, there's also a good use of it, of a computer. When you are in the education, these days the computer has become a major part of the education. And throughout this pandemic, some people who have the ability to work from home using the computer, some in the schooling system, computers has become a major key in the schooling system now, right? If you have any question, you can come off mute and just and talk. So when the computer has become a major key in the schooling system now, it has become a major key. When I say it has become a major key, it has become like something that we cannot do without the computers in the schooling system. So as we are talking about, there are so many ways, there are so many things that the computer has come to affect our life in a lot of things that we do. In communication, the computer is involved in it. When it comes to the government sector, everything right now is based on the computer system. And the computer too has come from come from different generations, right? When I say different generations, the computer that used to be in the 1970s is not the computers that is there now, right? The computers that was there in the 60s are not the computers that are there now. So which means that the computers also have gone through different stages. Computers have gone through different stages. So I want to give you some types of computers, right? Some types of computers or some, and you can, if you can take a screenshot or you can. So I want us to go through this. So we have your personal computer, right? So the personal computer is a single user computer system having absolutely powerful processor. So when you see the comparison of what a PC is, we have a workstation, we have a main computer, we have the mainframe, we have the the supercomputer, right? So when we say the mainframe and those personal computers, there are computers that do different activities, right? So you can't compare your personal computer to a computer that is somewhere in the data center, right? Cannot be compared to a computer or a server. That is a server to a computer system that is somewhere in the data center. So when you look at my screen, we have the personal computer, right? And we have defined it as a personal computer, defined as the small, relative, inexpensive computer. When you see the computers that are in the data centers and many, let's say, at your data center, the prices on those computers, the mainframe, the workstation, the prices of it is much more expensive than your own personal computer, right? So we have the personal computer, we have the workstation, right? The workstation are the ones that we use for designs and stuff. We use those ones for do design. Sometimes you have let's say that you go to a place that you have your main organization, and the engineer over there has a computer that has a whole lot of applications on it that is mainly used to do software development and other things. Those kind of computers have more input that are different in some way and somehow. So when you go through all that, you will see that computers have gone through stages of stages. Computers have gone through stages. So all types of computers follow the same basic and logic structure. All computers go through the same basic structure, like the diagram that we saw before. That there's the input, there's the processor, and there's the output. That is how all computers operate. There's the input, there's the processor, and there's the output. So computer take input, right? The process of what? Entering data and instructions into the computer system. So when that is the input, the computer also stores the data, saving the data and instructions, so they are available for processing and as and when it is required. And when you come into a processing data, it is when the logical operations on data in order to convert them into useful information. Then you come to the output of the computer, which is sometimes is your output devices. They are your output devices, your monitor, your printers. So the output information, the process of producing useful information or result for the user, such as when you try to look at something or when you want to print something. Do you understand? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Good, yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So if you have any questions, you can just come off mute and just say something, right? So when you see the computer, the back behind that, the computer, the input, the processor, and the output. So the input devices, the unit contains the devices which help, right? Which which we enter data. So the input devices are devices that help for you to enter data into the computer. So on that, and with that understanding, what are the things that will help you to enter data into the computer? If anyone can come off mute. What are the devices that help? What are the devices that help for you to enter information into the computer? Yeah, you can come off mute. Okay, so we know that some of the things are the keyboards, right? Keyboard is one of the ways for you to enter into. Yes, somebody said mouse. Mouse is input device, so that it can let you to navigate, right? So when you see the computer, the main thing is input, processor, output. That is what you have to get in your. What computer does is you get information, it processes the information, and it come out with the information. So like I said before, you have your monitor, you have your printer. The monitor that is there, the monitor screen is there so that you can see whatever that you are doing. So it is an output device. You have your printer that is there so that you can receive whatever that you printed, right? So that you can receive whatever that you printed, which is good. So output device translates the computer's output into something that in a form of understandable view, so that they can make sense out of it, right? That person can make sense out of it. So I want us to go into a certain part of the computer, then we will start going through what it means, what it does, and also we'll come to the key, all those things. So I want to start with the CPU. Yep, I want to start with the CPU. So then let's go here. Yeah, I'm here. So the computer has part, okay. So when we see the component of a computer, right? When we see the component, if you have your component, your computer in front of you, right? When you see the component of a computer, component of the computer comes with a you see a case, the tower, right? So when you see this, the main job of this case, right, is to make sure that it holds all the internal. So the computer consists of many devices, right? The computer consists of many devices, and that many devices are put together in a container, right? Are put together in a container. When I say in a container, in a case, so that it's going to hold whatever other devices that hold and protect the other devices of the computer, because they are all into a can, right? And the cases depend on your motherboard and how big the inside devices are. So sometimes you can get a computer that is small, the computer that is small, right? And the cases depend, the size of the case depend on the motherboard. So you will see that there are so many different types of cases. There are so many different types of cases. We have a medium size, we have a small size, we have even a very tiny one. So right now, where you are, if you're listening to me, you will see that, I don't know if your computer that you are sitting on, if you look at the tower, you look at the case, some cases are bigger than the other. Some people have a small CPU, some people have a small tower, some people have a big tower, right? So the tower, the case is used to hold all, is used to hold all the internal components of the computer. So we will start going with the what a CPU is, what a CPU is. So when you look inside the computer, and when you look inside the computer, let me just open one for you, open that computer for you so that we will go through it. So hold on. 1 minute.
Let's start it. Let's make it okay. Yeah, was story.
So do you all see my computer? So this is what I'm saying, that this is the tower, right? This is the tower. This is the tower, the case, the computer case, right? This is the computer case that house everything in here. So when I say it is these are the computer case that house everything, right? This is the case. This is the computer case that protect everything inside here. Everything inside here. So without the case, these things become vulnerable. You can just, without the case, everything over here is not protected. Right? So the case is very, very important. And the size of the case depending on the motherboard. This is the motherboard, which we'll go through some today. So I don't know if anyone has their computer open, but we will go through the motherboard. So when you see the motherboard, when you look at my screen now, right? The motherboard is this guy right here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, you see this green stuff. If you have a computer open, or if you have a tower open, you can also try to open it and see that this is the motherboard. So the motherboard is the board, right? I will share a screen that it look like. The motherboard is the main board of the computer. This is the main board of the computer, right? And when you look at it, it is screwed. They have this point that it is screwed inside on the computer. And what this motherboard does is that all other code, everything else, whatever is connected to the computer is directly connected to this motherboard, right? So everything over in the computer, whatever component in the computer is connected to the motherboard, right? So which means that all computers have motherboards, right? All computers have motherboards. So let me show you different motherboards, right? This thing is a computer, right? This thing is a computer, right? And look at how big it is. Right? And this is the case. Look at the case. And look at the motherboard. Right? Look at the motherboard.
Where's the hard drive?
This is the hard drive. Look at, this is the storage. Right? You see how small it is?
Yes. Wow.
And it goes inside here. Right? So this is the motherboard of this computer. Remember that I was telling you about the cases, right? That, look at how big this case is. Right? So this computer case, this is a computer case, the motherboard. So you see this where you put your Ethernet. This where you put your mouse and your keyboard and everything. This is where you connect to the monitor. This is it. This is your power. And this is your headphones. Right? And so, and these are heat sink. But we'll go through all that, right? We'll go through all that. So this is a motherboard. The size of the motherboard determine on your case, determines your case. So if your motherboard is small, you get a small case, right? So, and everything, you see this motherboard, everything in the computer is connected to the motherboard, is directly connected to the motherboard, right? This is the motherboard. Everything of the computer is connected to this motherboard. Right? So which makes the motherboard one of the most important devices in the computer. Everything has a motherboard. Every computer has a motherboard. So the motherboard is the place that all the components are connected to, so that they all can get all that devices that are connected to the motherboard. Those devices can communicate and operate together, right? So you have to understand that we have it's a common place that all the devices are connected to. The reason why that they are all connected to is to make sure that all the devices can integrate, right? It integrate all the components of the computer so that they can communicate and operate well. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the motherboard is one of the key devices in the computer. What it does is that all the devices are connected to the motherboard. All devices are connected to the motherboard. So the devices that are connected can communicate and operate together. So an example is this is the battery, right? This is your power. When you follow the cable, this is the power of the cable, right? When you follow the power of the cable, it come back to connect to what? The motherboard. This is the power of the cable. This cable, when you trace it back, it come back to this. When you see the hard drive, right? I'm taking the hard drive out. This is the hard drive, right? When you see the hard drive come all the way, you follow this blue cable, and it come back to connect to what? The motherboard, right? So when you see the motherboard is a very important device and part of the computer. And its job is that everything in the computer is connected to this motherboard right here. It's connected to this. And its function is that all the devices that are connected to the motherboard, they can communicate and operate together. So that when you send an information, goes to the motherboard, hey, I know where it is, I know my output and everything inside the motherboard. Any question? So since I said that the motherboard is a very, so my question is that, does all computers have a motherboard?
Yes.
Yes.
So can a computer work without a motherboard? Right? The computer cannot work with them. And most electronics and most computers, they all have motherboard. When you take your electronic watch, for instance, there is a motherboard inside, right? Everything has a motherboard. Your watch that you have, my electronic watch, this watch has a motherboard, right? This watch has a motherboard because there are so many controls. There are controls on the watch that it has to, those parts of the watch has to come together so that they can be able to work together and operate together. So an example is this computer that I showed you, right? Remember that I was saying that this is the output device. This is the HDMI. The HDMI has to be connected to the motherboard. To the motherboard. The Ethernet connection. This is where you put your Ethernet cable, right? Your Ethernet connection has to be, I'm going to turn this one on for you to see. I'm going to turn this one on. So hold on. I don't want to get, no, let me turn this one on. You see this? So this is the case. This is everything. So I'm going to turn it on for you to see. I have so many cables over here. So this is the power cable. This is the power cable to this computer, right? So it goes inside here. And look. Do we see it? Right? Then we have an Ethernet cable that's connected to here. And by the way, this can also do wireless. and you connect it right here. You see, right? So this is the motherboard. Everything connects to the motherboard. The power connects to the motherboard, just as this power, this is the power, also connects to the motherboard, right? As this power also connects to the motherboard right here, this is the power. This is the power. The same way, this is the power to this one, and it connects right here. And this is your Ethernet. When we get to this, your Ethernet connection, this is where you put your keyboard, right? This is where you put your keyboard. So if you have a keyboard, you can put your wireless keyboard. Let me take one and show you. So this is your wireless keyboard, right? This is your wireless keyboard connection. You can just put it right here. And you can use, so you see, and you can use this computer now. This computer now is a different operating system when we get there. You can put your headphones here and listen to whatever is going on. Right? So this is also the main reason why I wanted to show you guys this is because that I want to show you that we have different motherboards, right? Different motherboards. So of course, you don't, when you want to turn on your computer, you don't pull the power. You have to go inside, do what? Shut down. But because of training purposes, and I want to, let me just put this one aside, okay? So the storage place, this is the motherboard, right? So, so this guy, right? The motherboard, you remember that I was showing you this hard drive, right? This is the hard drive. The hard drive is also okay. So somebody said that we should differentiate between a computer and a monitor, right? Somebody said that please differentiate between the computer and the monitor. So the monitors, right? So the computer is what we are showing right now, right? So the computer, a computer is a combination of many devices put together, right? When I say many devices, like what I'm showing now, this is all this thing in a case that makes it a computer. So a computer comes with a motherboard, comes with this. It is all those components of the computer, of the device, of the things that come together as a computer. So earlier we said that we have a personal computer, we have different kinds of computers. So the computer itself is what we sometimes call the system unit, right? It's what we call the system unit. The monitor, the visual monitor is the little TV that comes with it. The little TV. So so sometimes you will see that you have where if you are sitting in front of a computer, there's the tower, the system unit, the tower that is sometimes either down or sitting next to the little TV that we have. So that little TV is the monitor. Did I answer the question? So we are talking about this motherboard. So in let me show you one of the how it looked like. So let me share my screen here, and let me share this guy. Let me share this guy. So when you see my screen, when you take a motherboard out, this is what it look like. Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
So this is how it look like. And motherboard is so important. Is so important in the like what I showed you. You see this side, right? Let me make it big. You see this end, this side, right? That is the Ethernet port. You know, this is for your video. This is your VGA, the VGA input. This is your DVI input. It has the HDMI input, right? It has the serial input too inside. So these are input, these are output. So your VGA output and your remember that when I was showing you the small computer, it only had what? Only HDMI output. Correct. So when you see this, you have your PCI input and stuff. So this motherboard, this is when you take the motherboard out, this is how it look like. This is a new motherboard out of a box. This is how the motherboard look like. And motherboards are not cheap. Motherboards are very, very expensive. Motherboards are very, very expensive. You see this, you are looking at my screen, right?
Yes.
You see this black place, right? This black place on the motherboard, I'm going with what the person asked, is what we put in the CPU. So you see, if you can take a screenshot of this, which maybe next time I will just put things together and send them to you. This guy is the motherboard. So this is out of the, this is what it comes out of the box, right? So when you look at my screen now, when you look at the video that I'm sharing, right? When you look at the video that I'm sharing, that motherboard is this guy right here. Is this guy right here, this green stuff, this green big board that is here. And I showed you the other motherboard, right? I showed you this motherboard, and it does the same thing with what the one that I showed you before. It does the same way, right? So when you see the motherboard, number one, what the job of the motherboard is that all the devices, all the component of the computer, the internal component devices inside the computer, they are all connected to the motherboard. It's the main board, and everything inside, everything in the computer, they are all connected to the motherboard. The hard drive is connected to the motherboard. Everything is connected to the motherboard. It is connected to the motherboard so that all the devices that are inside the computer, all the devices, all the components of the computer can communicate and operate together, right? They can communicate and operate together. So if you are troubleshooting, right? If you are troubleshooting, since we said that all the devices are connected to the motherboard, if you are troubleshooting a problem, let's say that you are typing, but you cannot see what you are typing on the screen, where do you check? What do you check? Huh? You can come off mute. Let's say that you are typing. You have a No, we didn't hear you. You can also type it there. if we say that every component, everything is connected to the motherboard, and let's say that you are typing, right? And you cannot see what you cannot see it on the screen. What are the things that you check?
You check the cable to the monitor.
No, use that word again.
The cable to the monitor, connected to the monitor.
Okay.
No, no. You check the cable connected to the system unit, rather.
Yes. So you check the keyboard cable connected to the system unit, right? So you check the key because it has to be connected to the motherboard. When you remember that remember what I showed you in before. Look at this motherboard. It's the same thing everywhere. So if it looks small or big, it's the same thing. You see that the keyboard is connected where? To this USB. And this USB is connected to the motherboard. It is the same everywhere, right? It is the same everywhere. When you see this one, right? When you see this one, this is where the keyboard is. This is where it connects the keyboard to outside, right? So if you are typing and you don't see it, then check your connection to the motherboard. So if I'm typing, but I don't see it. So what I have to do, I have to check my USB connection, my keyboard where it's connected here to see that, okay, this is connected. Why is it not working? We understand? Yeah. So everything is connected to the motherboard. The reason why it is connected to the motherboard so that all the devices connected can able to communicate and operate together. So in the computer, it is just one team that we have to operate together. So these are all the components that makes up a computer. So we have the motherboard, which is the main board of the computer. We have different ones, right? We have different sizes of motherboard. No motherboard is one. It's just a one size. We have different size. As I showed you the examples of the small computer that I have and the big computer that I also have, right? The next thing that we are going to talk about, is the CPU. And I know somebody put a question over there that what is the difference between the system unit and the CPU, right? So the CPU is the brain of the computer. When I say the brain of the computer, it processes all the information, right? It processes all the information. So if it is the brain of the computer, is the CPU also connected to the motherboard? My question.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
The CPU is also connected to the motherboard, correct?
Yes.
The CPU is also connected to the motherboard. So it is the brain of the computer. Remember that we said that all the components are connected to the motherboard so that they can be able to communicate and operate together, right? So let's use ourselves, for instance. We have our hands, we have our leg, we have our eyes, right? We have our legs. If your brain, right? If your brain is not functioning, there's no way that your leg, your hands can communicate together, because let's say that you go out to the farm or somewhere, or something is burning. Your eyes will see that this thing is burning, right? Your eyes will see that maybe there's a fire, and your eyes will communicate it with your brain. Your eyes will communicate with your brain and say that, oh, there's fire. Should I go towards the fire, or should I go towards the fire, or should I run away from the fire? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the CPU is the brain inside the computer that is going to what? Operate. That will come to life when they are communicating and when they are processing together. So every motherboard comes with a CPU. So CPU is called the acronym to CPU. It means it is the central processing unit. It is the central processing unit. Do you understand?
Yes.
Yeah, it is the central processing unit. And the unit controls the operations. Remember, the unit controls the operations of all parts of the computer, right? It controls all the information. So like I said, this guy right here, this is my guy right here, right? Everything is connected. Everything is connected to this. I'm using two computers. This is a computer number 1, and this is computer number 2. You all see the different sizes. Computer number 1, I'm going to put computer number 1, number 2 here, right? So you will see that all these components, right? The CPU, I will show you how the CPU look like and where it is. This is how the CPU look like. I think I have it here, but let me check it and see. Okay. So this is how it look like. This is the main thing of the computer, right? This is how it look like. This is how it look like. And the connection to this is sit right here on the motherboard. Inside the motherboard. So inside the motherboard, that is where it sits. Right here inside the motherboard. Right here inside. So this is where the CPU sits. So if you have I will show you this. So the CPU is actually sitting underneath this guy. It's sitting underneath this guy. When it comes to this guy, right, the CPU is sitting underneath this guy. So the CPU of this computer is up here. It's sitting underneath this. Do we see it? Right? So that is where the CPU is sitting. So let's go through the CPU again. So the CPU is responsible for controlling the data is controlling the transfer of data and the instructions among the unit of a computer. So somebody had a question that I asked that question because you were referring the system unit as the CPU, right? The CPU computer, which sometimes go we are doing so in the confusion. Okay, so what the person is trying to say is that somebody asked a question that your personal computer, the personal computer, right, and the tower consists of all these things. So when I say that the processor, the system, the CPU is the system, the central processing unit, right? And it is in the computer. Sometimes people call the whole system unit CPU. People call the whole system, yeah, like, oh, this is a CPU. No, it is a CPU is part of the component of the computer. CPU is part of the component of a computer. So if somebody is saying that the CPU, you can correct that person that the CPU is part of the component of the computer, right? So we can call this thing a tower. The tower, the system unit, which one? This is a system. The system unit, the tower, we call it the tower, or the personal computer, right? Or the case, this thing, this big thing right here, we call it the case. That we can call it the tower, or we can call it the computer, right? We can call it the computer. Why are we calling the computer? Because it contains this case, right? This case right here contains all the components of the computer, including the CPU. Any questions? Any questions? So if you have a computer, you have the tower there. The tower, the computer itself consists of the motherboard, the CPU, and everything. We need a CPU. So the CPU, as I said, is the brain of the computer. Is the brain of the computer. Remember that we have the motherboard. I want to go and make it clear. The motherboard, what does the motherboard do? The motherboard is there so that all the devices in the computer connect to this motherboard, so that they will have the ability for them to be able to communicate with each other. So right now you have a meeting place, a place that all the devices are connected to, which is the motherboard. Then the CPU, the central processing unit, comes in, and what it does is that it controls the operations of all the parts of the computer, right? It controls all the operation. It is responsible for controlling the transfer of data and instructions among the unit of a computer. So the example that I gave, that let us take me and you, for instance, because me and you, we are a big computer, right? Me and you, we have, and our component of me and you is that we have ears to hear, we have eyes to see, we have brains, we have legs, we have all these things. So when you see fire, the fire is burning, your eyes look at it and send the information to your brain. And your brain would tell you that, hey, my legs, get ready to run. Then the legs get ready to run. You understand what I'm saying? So the CPU is the main device, the brain of the computer. is the main device, the brain of the computer. The brain of the computer tells the devices that are connected to the computer so that they can function right. Right? They can function right. Okay? So what it also does is that it manages and coordinates all the units in the computer. Right? All the units in the computer. That is the CPU. It communicates with, so the CPU communicates with the output and input devices and transfer data, right, from one place to the other. Right? So with that understanding, who can tell me the functions of a motherboard? Why is the motherboard there?
Hello.
Yes.
The motherboard coordinates with other components of the computer to process and then give out output.
Okay. Okay, so that's what the motherboard does. The motherboard makes sure that all the components of the system unit are connected to, and also the connection that so that they can communicate. All those devices connected to can communicate and operate together. Someone else too can answer in their own understanding. In your own understanding, you can also answer the question. What is the functions of the motherboard? Yeah, in your own understanding, what do you think? What are the functions of the motherboard?
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
I think it does the thinking for the computer.
That is the what?
The motherboard.
What does it do? What is the function?
That is it. That's the thinking. If the computer wants to calculate or perform a function, the motherboard that will do that.
No, no, we have something that does you remember that we said that the CPU is the brain, right? We said that the CPU is the brain. So if we say the CPU, the central processing unit, is the brain of the computer. So when you say the brain of the computer, it is that side that do the thinking. So what does the motherboard do?
The motherboard is that part of the computer where the other parts are connected to it to work together in unison.
Yeah, so you see, so the motherboard is where everything is connected to. So remember it's a key. Remember that the computer is not just one part. The computer has so many parts, right? The computer has so many parts. So all the parts of the computer has to be connected to one place so that they can communicate together, correct? So that is where the motherboard comes in. So all this thing has so many parts, but they have to be connected to this, right? So they have to be connected to a motherboard. This thing has its own part, but they have to be connected to a motherboard so that all these parts can communicate together, right? All these parts, these are different parts of the computer, right? They have to be connected to this motherboard. They have to be connected to this motherboard so that this part right here, this part right here, this part right here, this part right here, they can all communicate together, right? That is how it is over here. So all these parts on this motherboard, we have this one, we have the hard drive. They are connected to the motherboard, to this motherboard right here, this green stuff, so that all the devices in the computer can talk and communicate with each other. Do we understand?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So the motherboard is not the brain of the computer. It is there to connect all the devices. Now, as part of the motherboard, there is the CPU, the central processing unit. That is the one that acts like the brain of the computer. The brain, and I showed you how it looked like, right? It is a very small thing. This is how it looked like. It is just the one that I showed you before. Let me bring it up again. So this is how it looked like. This is how it looked like in the computer. And on the motherboard, right? It sits right here. It sits inside here and it is logged, right? It is logged. When it sits right here, it is logged. It sits underneath this big guy right here. You see this big thing, right? This is where the motherboard sits. This thing right here, this whole big thing, right? This big thing is called the heat sink. The heat sink, right? It's called the heat sink, this big whole thing. It is sitting underneath this computer. It is sitting on top of the brain, because you see the brain, which is the CPU, it will start processing. It is there. The heat sink is there to make sure that the brain of the computer doesn't get hot. Because me and you know that every time that how do you call it? You'll be there. Will say, Charlie, I'm wad. I'm wad. If your brain becomes so hot, you be thinking so much that you can have a headache, right? You can be thinking so much that you can have a headache. That when somebody put their hands on your face, you will see that, Charlie, why you're hot? The man is hot. Well, so this guy right here is there to be able to cool the CPU. So the main thing about the CPU, right, which I said is the brain of the computer. Number one is the brain of the computer. The CPU is considered as the brain of the computer. The CPU performs all data types of processing, right? So when you see the CPU, it's also responsible for the controlling of transfer of data and instructions among the system unit. It manages and coordinates all the units of the computer. What it also does is that it obtains the instructions from the memory and interprets it directly to the operations of the computer, right? So let's see what the functions of your brain. What does your brain does? Right? Any question? Any question? So in your own words and with what I've said, what is the CPU? This is my question. What is the CPU? What is the CPU? Somebody can answer. What is the CPU? What is the CPU? And what is the functions of a CPU? One of the functions of the CPU.
It's like our brain.
Okay.
So as we use our brain to think, remember everything, the same thing that the CPU also do. So it also remember every data or information that you put on the computer. It recognize them and share amounts where it is supposed to go.
Okay. Okay. So, which is good. So, like what I said before about the we human beings, right? We human beings, your eye will see the thing, then it will send message to your brain. Then when it send message to your brain will go to the part that is needed to do that operation. So like I said, when you see fire burning, your eye see it, send the information to your brain, and your brain will tell the leg, man, get ready to run, there's fire. Right, get ready, then the leg will do the operation that is needed. Somebody can also go ahead and answer that question, that what is the CPU and what is the function of the CPU? Yeah, somebody can go ahead and answer that question with your own words and understanding. Yeah, somebody can also answer that question.
Yeah, the CPU could miss the activities of the other parts of the computer.
Okay. Okay. That is also good.
It's also process all the tests that is being input into the computer.
Okay. That is also good. What else? What else? In your own words, too. In your own words and understanding. So can the computer operate without the CPU?
No.
Why? Why?
Because the CPU is the
engine.
the brain of the computer.
Okay.
Okay. So let's use ourselves for instance, right? I like to use ourselves. When somebody's brain is not functioning right, what happened?
He's mad.
That person is
That person
is
can
mad.
do other things, but not properly well. So if a computer doesn't have the memory, it can work, but cannot work properly as a mad person.
Okay. But the brain, right? The brain is the one that tells the hand to do something. So if your brain is not functioning right, it can affect the operations of you, right? Yeah. So if your brains are not functioning right, it can also affect what you do. That is the same thing in a computer, right? If the CPU is not functioning right, it can affect the things in the computer, some of the devices in the computer. If the brains is not functioning right, you'll be typing something and it will be giving you other things. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So we have certain keys, right? When you come to the computer, when you come to the motherboard, oh, it's almost 5. It's almost 10 over there. So when you see the motherboard, I think that we are going to end with these two, the CPU and the motherboard. The CPU, you can write it down, because the next time I think we'll also organize them. We'll go through the different parts because of time. My time over here is 4:50 a.m. right? 4:50 a.m.
On weekdays.
That is
right? 4:50 a.m. And I believe that
yeah, now that they are, yes.
If they are leading us, then
I believe that you are about 9:50, right?
Yes, exactly.
9:50, and I wanted to finish by 10, so that you can also have all. I didn't want to keep you guys for a long time, unless you guys are ready to stay there for some time, right? Yeah, I didn't want to keep you guys for, so that we can continue next time. So, but my main point for this time, so that the instructors, and those can also take you through what I'm talking about. So you will see that we talked about the motherboard, we talked about the computer case, and I showed you that it's very important, these three things. The computer case houses all the components of the computer, right? The computer case houses all the components of the computer. It is important, though. It is important that it does that. It houses all the components of the computer, so that this component will not be outside, right? And we said that all the components are put together in this case. So when you look at the case of a computer, it will look, I'm just recapping what we said. So the case of a computer looks something like this. Right? So the case look like this. The case look like this. You see, this is the case of a computer. This is also called the tower, right? It is also called the tower. Some people also call it the system unit. So remember the names of it. Some people call it what? The tower. Some people call it the tower. Some people call it the system unit. Some people call it the case. It is not called the CPU. Are we clear with that one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it is not called the CPU. The CPU is another part. And from now, we understand that the CPU is the CPU is the brain of the computer. Is the brain of the computer. So if that is the case, hold on a minute. So in the case, this is what the case look like if there's nothing connected, right? The case, that is how the case look like if there's nothing connected. Oh, my computer. So this is how the case look like if there's nothing connected, and this is how it look like when there are things connected, right? So, and this is how the motherboard look like when you take it out from the box in a new one. This is how it look like. So you see that you have the output, which is this, which are these guys over here, the visual output. These are input devices. One minute. Yeah, so these are input devices. and I said that, and this is the motherboard. And we came to say that what is a motherboard? If somebody can tell me, what is the motherboard? What is the motherboard? What is the functions of a motherboard? Anybody can go. What are the functions of the motherboard?
We did mention that it is the part to which all other parts of the computer is connected to.
Yep, it is where all other parts of the computers are connected to. So that is where the motherboard is. So all other parts of the computer are connected to the motherboard. It is very important. So you can't see a motherboard and say that the motherboard is called the CPU, right? But what you can say is that the motherboard, right? The motherboard also, the CPU is also connected to the motherboard, right? Because me and you came to an agreement that all the components of the computer, right? All the components of the computer, they are all connected to the motherboard. Correct? They are all connected to the motherboard. So the motherboard is a very, very important key that we have to understand. The motherboard is a very important key that me and you, we have to understand. We have to understand before we leave here that the motherboard, what it does is that it controls. When I say it controls, I'm saying that whatever devices, all the devices are connected to it. And its main job is to make sure that whatever devices connected to it can communicate and operate well. And that is it. That is it work, and it does it work very well. It does it work very, very well. Right? It does it work very, very well. The motherboard does it work. So if there's a problem with the motherboard, it affects the computer. Right? If there's a problem with the motherboard, it affects the operations of the computer, because right now, this is the power. The power is not working, or the motherboard cannot detect that the power is working for it to send the information that, hey, power, you are not working. So if the motherboard cannot detect the power, there's a problem, right? If the motherboard cannot detect your keyboard, there's a problem. So the motherboard is the key, and the system, the CPU, the central processing unit. What is the work of the CPU? What is the work of the CPU? Somebody can go ahead and tell me what is the work of the CPU. Anyone can go. The work of the CPU. So first of all, what is CPU? So you mentioned CPU. What does it stand for? What is the C? What is the P? What is the U?
Central processing units.
Yes, sir.
So it is that part of the computer that ensures effective communication and operation of the other parts.
Okay. Okay. Somebody else.
It integrates all other components of the computer.
Okay. Somebody else. So we look at our brain, and we have the functions of our brain, and just use that functions on our brain as the CPU, right? As the CPU. So, and the example that I gave is that without the CPU, the computer will not work. I'm saying this because have we heard about that how do you call it, the the processor that they say that, oh, this is i5, this is i7, this is i3.
Yes.
We've heard it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so these are all examples of the processor. These are all examples of the processor that there's this thing, the core processor, the i5, they have different kinds of processor. So which means that with regards to me and you, right? With regards to me and you, some brains are faster than the other.
Yes.
Right? Some brains, they process things so fast. Right? So you have some people that are so good that they can process things very fast. There are some brains that would take their time to process. You understand?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is the difference between the different processes that we have. And when we meet the next time, if we come early and there is time, we will go through what those processor is. Okay, we'll go through what those processor is. And also next time we will go through those input devices and those output devices in a computer. Those input devices and those output devices in a computer. So that whenever you see something, you see, let's say, a mouse. A mouse is a what? Is it an input device or output device?
Input.
Input device. It's a printer output or input?
Output device.
It's a microphone input or output?
Input.
Input, right? Is the headphone? It's a headphone input or output?
Output.
Output. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a scanner. It's a scanner input or output,
Input device.
right?
No, I now understand.
Huh?
I now understand the input. Yes. With the
So you don't understand what?
I'm saying that I was at a loss, but with the last question, the way it was answered, I don't got to understand the difference between the input and the output.
Yeah. So the input devices, right? So we have input devices. Input devices are devices that send information to the system unit. So let's give an example of a keyboard, right?
Okay, a keyboard.
Yeah. So what the keyboard send information? What information that the keyboard send? It is the information that you are typing.
Yes. Okay.
So you are sending the instruction. So the keyboard is input, is sending instructions to the computer. So
Okay.
to the computer, it is receiving instruction. So the keyboard become what? An input device.
Okay.
Right?
The printer is output device.
Right?
Okay.
The printer, if you have a printer, the printer print what? It prints whatever that you send to the computer.
Yeah.
So the printer becomes what device?
Output device.
The monitor, the small TV, the small monitor, the TV that is sitting on the table, is it output or input?
Output.
Why is it output?
It displays the instructions.
Yes, it displays the instructions. So the computer put the keyboard type input into the system unit. Then the monitor display the instruction that is there.
Yes.
Right? So the next time that we meet, this one, I want us to have understanding of two things, because sometimes I don't want us to go and call a computer a CPU, right? So if somebody says that this is a CPU, no, it is the computer. The CPU is part of the system unit, right? You don't see a motherboard and call the motherboard the CPU. No, it is a motherboard that all the components of the computers are connected to it so that they can communicate together and operate together, which means that the CPU is part of the motherboard, right? The CPU is also connected to the motherboard. So we don't look at this, we don't go and say that, oh, can you bring the CPU? Really?
I'll go and remove it and bring it to you.
He said you go. Yeah, he said you go and remove it and bring it. Yeah. That, hey, this is your CPU, take your CPU. He said that no, the CPU is part of the computer. So when you say bring the CPU, it's like, okay, should I go and open the computer and bring only that part out so that you can correct the person that this thing is, sometimes we call it the tower, sometimes we call it the PC, sometimes we call it the system unit, because it contains different of system, different of component, and all that component is connected to a motherboard, and it is connected to a motherboard because we want the devices in the computer to communicate to each other. And when we say that all devices are connected to the motherboard, which include our brain, the brain of the computer is also connected to the motherboard. Okay. Okay. So we have all those understanding, and I showed you different types of this thing. This computer is called a Raspberry Pi.
What Raspberry? Where can we get some to buy?
It's called Raspberry Pi. This is it. This is the computer. So
there's some in Ghana.
huh? I have a lot of these. I have like almost 6 of them.
I want one.
That does the whole. So this one, I use this one for it. This one has Windows on this. It's a Windows operating system,
Okay.
right? And this is where the memory is. This is the memory.
Can it connect to any size of monitor?
Yeah. If it has HDMI, it will connect.
Okay.
Look. If the monitor has HDMI connection, it will connect.
Okay.
Right? So your monitor, if it has HDMI, this one you connect your keyboard to it. You connect your keyboard to it over here, right? You connect your mouse to it, your keyboard and your mouse to it, and that is it. You have a computer. Okay. So, and this is the same thing as this guy right here. They are the same, that I took this out. This is the memory right here. So you take this out. So this is the storage. This is the storage. This is where it stores information. So you just put it right back, and you are good to go. So this is the computer. Look at how big it is. Right? I don't have a big hand. My hands is not big, but it's just that the computer is small. That makes my hand so big. Right? So this is what. So next time that we meet, we'll continue from here. Okay, we'll continue from here. Any other questions before we leave? Any other questions? Yeah, if you have a question, let me know.
Yes. Huh? But then last week, the last
Yeah. Yeah, I'm waiting for questions. Yeah, somebody said, is there a difference between the CPU and the memory? Yes, there's a difference. So I didn't talk about the memory and different the memories that we have. You see, yeah, there's a difference between the CPU and the memory. And if you are still watching, these are all memories, right? Look, these are memories. Right, and they all sit on the motherboard. I wanted to do it before the next time. You see, look, it's all this one connected here. These are memories. These are all memories. This is it. This guy sits inside here. It sits inside this. It's called the PCI slot. You see this guy, so you can take it out. You can take it out and put it back. Any other question? Any other questions? No. So if there are no questions, then I will hand over to Yaya. Yaya, if during the course of the week, if anyone has a question, they can send that question to me. I will answer. Then I will answer the question before we also plan for our next session. I want to take my time so that you guys will have understanding of what it is. And I know that from today going, when somebody say that bring the CPU, you are going to tell the person that no, I can't bring you the CPU. Then you have to ask the person that what is it that they want? That do you want the system unit? Do you want the whole computer? Do you want the tower? Do you want the system? So you call it the name that the professional name, and let them know that you know, right? That you correct the person that it is not called the CPU. And sometimes when you say that, oh, sometimes you go to a place, they say that, oh, the CPU is full. Really, it's full of what? Oh, but the CPU is full. Oh, the CPU is full. Can the CPU get full? Right? So the understanding is that inside the CPU operates, even the memory is attached to the motherboard, right? So there are certain things that when they say it, you just have understanding, a professional understanding that there's difference between the CPU, the CPU and the computer is a whole thing. The CPU is part of the computer. Okay. So if you have any questions, let Yaya know, or you can just type in your questions, then we'll take it from there. I believe that it is it is past 10 o'clock at your end. It is 5:14 at my end, 5:14 a.m. Okay, so until then, talk to you guys again next time.
Okay, thank you so much, Tony.
Okay.
We appreciate your time, your energy, everything, and I hope this one has been very beneficial and then impactful. But again, as you said earlier, we want to always co-create this with let me say, the teachers and then the facilitators.
Yes.
So if there's anything along the line, let's just pass the information to any one of the administrators on the WhatsApp page. And then it will get to the facilitator to always adjust to maybe their teaching and then how they go about everything. So aside we having specific questions, if we have suggestions to make the learning better, we appreciate it much.
Oh, okay. And yeah, and the next time that we meet, I think that we should get one of the computers and open it.
Yes, we have 3 of them here. They are all open, and we were
Okay.
using it along as you go.
Okay. So the next time we are actually going to open and take the CPU out. Yeah, we are going to open it and we are going to open the heat sink. Okay, we are going to take this heat sink out so that we can see it for ourselves. We can see it for ourselves what the CPU look like. So if next time, if you have the screwdrivers and all those gadgets ready, we'll go through that one before we start.
Thank you so much.
All right. So good morning to everyone.